All right, and that's it. So it is just me today, and we're going to be talking through this awesome graphic that we've got out. But we're going to give it a couple of minutes, even though I was a couple of minutes late. I had a nice computer restart, so that was nice and exciting right before time. So thank you guys for your patience there. And then if you want, just go ahead and drop in the comments where you're listening in from today. That would be good. And we'll see where everybody's from. So because I did just have this restart, I am going to go through and go ahead and pull up the photo now. So it'll be just a minute before we get that on. But the reason I wanted to do this particular discussion is because a lot of folks have questions about this kind of stuff, right? Or they hear it a lot in calls that they're in, right? As far as having to understand these words, sometimes when tech people meet construction people, they don't always line up, right? And especially in their words and different things that they're wanting to discuss. So let's see if we can take a look here, and we're going to pull up the graphic. And because I'm so brave today, I'm just going to go with entire screen so you guys can see different kind of stuff in here. So let's hit share. That was awesome. All right. Let's not do it that way. Let's try a different way. We're going to try with a file. So one thing that I like to tell people is that technology is really cool until it's not. And so it's times like these where we've got all kinds of things going on, and we just have to keep trying in a different way before everything will work. So for instance, with this one, sharing didn't work for me, like sharing my screen. And so I chose to share a file instead. So let's get back into it. So this is pretty much the makeup of tech stacks. Sometimes you'll see definitely more of these bubbles outside of here. But for our conversation today, I did want to go ahead and combine them because sometimes you can find them in the same platform offering that you're looking for. And sometimes it's best for your company and your people if you actually choose two different platforms there. So, and specifically what I'm talking about, it would be like invoice capture, right? Or expense reports, credit card payments. Sometimes there's multiple avenues that you could go there, and picking one platform may not, be the best for your company, right? So usually everybody's got their ERP. And for those who get lost at just the start of that, the ERP is just enterprise resource planning. And usually what I tell people, I don't even go into the acronym. I just say your bookkeeping software, right? So this is where all of our accountants hang out, and our friends that do journal entries, different things like that. They all live in the ERP. So what we've seen in the past few years is a movement to get our project team members who are working out in the field out of the ERP and into an actual real life project management software like Procore. And so this is where we want to put all of our project teams and folks that are not necessarily strictly accountants. Now there's a few reasons for all of that. And so, it looks like we've got Abdur coming in. Good evening, all of my friends. So thank you for tuning in. It sounds like it might be your dinner show. So hopefully it doesn't disappoint there. And thank you for joining us as well. So the movement really is for a few reasons, right? The ERP, like we said, is for our accountants. There's lots of private things in there that we don't necessarily want everyone to see, and we don't want everyone to have access to as well. Additionally, there's some things, like when you print reports from the ERP, sometimes, like unless you're building a custom report, some kind of in there, you're not really able to filter out and make, we'll say, the data that you want to appear on your report. So if there's, a particular view or filter or things like that. Now, folks do have a nice habit of data dumping, which is basically just what they call a current export of information, usually transactions, right? And all the transaction details and things that we would want there. And they'll export it into Excel. Okay. Now that's completely fine. But again, we're still just in Excel. And so if I was looking at modernizing my construction company, I'd want to be getting my folks out of Excel and into these more comprehensive functional platforms. And typically they usually have a lot better, we'll say easier interface for people to use, and pretty good reports, right? So security would be a good reason why I want only my accountants inside the ERP, and then functionality, ease of use, different things like that. We've always got to have our bookkeeping software, okay? We cannot, just go around saying, well, I think there's $100 in this account or this, GL, whatever it is. So we need that software to kind of replace the manual bookkeeping things that people used to do, right? They were huge books. You saw them on, I think it was Enron, or there's a couple of other people, but in my mind, what I'm thinking about is the guy who kept two set of books. And so basically one set of books was at the office and the other set was at home. And so you can imagine what kind of things go on there when you're not supposed to have two sets of books. And so I'll let you guys decipher that how you like. But when you do have two sets of books, things happen, right? But we don't want to do it on those big ledger books anymore. What we want to do is have it all inside of a platform software, hopefully cloud-based, right? So where we can log in from anywhere, especially if we have to suddenly be remote or work from home, anything like that. And then also traveling, right? So that cloud access is a lot easier for some folks, and they're saying safer, yeah. So we've got our bookkeeping software here. Again, this is always going to be in play. We always are going to need that place to keep our books. And so that's what that is. Now, there are several offerings inside the construction industry, which I know you guys know because everybody uses one. So some familiar names there is going to be Sage, right? And any of their offerings that they have there. They also have a few things like estimating, invoice capture, stuff like that. So Sage is pretty solid in the market. Acumatica is another player in that area. And then, of course, we see QuickBooks still. So there's a lot of folks still using QuickBooks, and that's okay. It just depends on what's best for your company. So something like this, when we've got this whole diagram and everything integrated, allows each of your teams to pick out the platform that's best for them. And that's really important because these are the people doing the work, and that's who we care about, right? So once we pick our ERP, and I do see a lot of folks taking in consideration when they're going to upgrade from, let's say, their first ERP that they chose in the 80s or 90s, they actually take a look at all of the platforms. And that's a fair idea, but we do want to make sure that we're not picking off too much to implement at one time, because if we overwhelm our users or even ourselves, then it's not going to go as well as we'd hoped or that we want it to. So definitely make sure that you would be staggering any of these multiple implementations that are going on at once, and maybe even choose the one that's most important to you or the one that's going to be the biggest headache or trouble. Now, typically your ERP is going to be where all of your cost codes are living, your vendor directory, right? All of those important things that we do inside of accounting, and then we filter and send those things out to the other platforms. Okay, so what's an example of that? So project management, and if I've got it orange, not to be suggestive or anything, but something like Procore can be connected to your bookkeeping software. And then that allows your project teams to use Procore. Okay, so now all of a sudden they have access to getting Procore on their phones. And they can look at drawings. They can have a bigger screen like an iPad. I know lots of companies that have purchased iPads for everyone in the field, or maybe just all superintendents in the field. It just depends on how you guys want to mark that line in the sand. But being able to do that and send information back and forth from our bookkeeping software allows our project teams to make better informed decisions, and also faster sometimes, right? They don't have to call anybody. They don't have to ask questions. They can just go look for themselves. And then, they can do other things by themselves too, like forecasting. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So once we have our project management software platform picked out, and in this case, I'm just going to keep saying Procore because that's what I'm familiar with. We want to integrate that with our bookkeeping software. Now, there's lots of players in the market to integrate just this one piece. Okay. And then there's also players in the market that will integrate multiple things for you and then give you kind of like an aggregated reporting down here, which we'll get to a little bit later. But if we're looking to just make this one connection right here from the project management software to the bookkeeping software, then we would look at somebody like Agave, or Procore's actually got a few of the integration modules built out, right, that they can offer to you and support. And then there's also a few other people in the market, like we were saying, Agave, right? And then a couple of others up to that. I wish I could remember one right now that I'm trying to think of. It's actually for QuickBooks, and they do invoice capture at the same time. So that's something that's kind of differentiating the market right now, is that you don't have to connect just this piece. You can connect this piece and get additional functionality. You also don't have to connect this piece with only what's offered from the Procore marketplace, okay? So reasons that you would want to leave the Procore, what do I say? Because Agave is in the marketplace. So that's not really an accurate statement. But what I mean is, if you don't want to have Procore integrate your bookkeeping platform with something that's already established and everyone's using and they support, then there are other companies out there that can connect that data for you. And not only that, but they can do custom things. So let's say that you have a really, really rad purchase order platform, and you're not going to leave it because you do a lot of purchase orders and it gives you a lot of information and things that you're not going to be getting inside of Procore or somewhere else. Keep your purchase order software, right? And then get someone like Agave who can take those purchase orders that are feeding most likely from the purchase order platform into your bookkeeping software right here. And you can have them send the purchase orders from your bookkeeping software to Procore. Now, why is that important? The majority of the Procore integrations only go certain directions and they do certain things. So if you're looking for expanded capabilities as far as integrating different items and things like that, then you will want to look outside of the Procore built. That's the right phrase, the Procore built integrations, right? And it's not anything about, who does what or what's a better product. What it's about is what's best for your company and what you need to integrate, right? Very good. So that's our project management side. And again, it feeds information into our bookkeeping software, and our bookkeeping software also sends information back to our project management software. So the next little bubble over here is invoice capture, expense reports, and credit card payments. We've seen a big movement of folks wanting to not write checks, and it's because they cost money. Somebody has to keep the paper, somebody has to load the printer, and all of that jazz. And of course, stuffing and mailing. Okay. Now we do recognize that there are still some folks that can only function with checks, right? Not to call any names because I don't believe in that, but I believe I've heard you guys and gals call them trunk slammers. Okay. So somebody like that is not going to necessarily have the capabilities to accept credit card payments or even accept an ACH payment. They may not want to, they may not want to deal with it. They may not be able to, they may not know how to, and just all of those things, right? And so those types of folks are going to want that paper check. They want to go to the bank and they want to put it in. That's fine. Most of the platforms that you see for credit card payments are usually a part of one of these other categories, right? Like expense reports or invoice capture. And so what they're trying to do is capitalize on payments that need to be sent. And some folks love the idea of just getting a credit card email. It comes across and says, hey, you're ready to run your transaction. It's approved for $3,000, whatever the case is. And so they like that and enjoy it. Now, what's in it for you or the bank, right? Is the fees. And that's another reason why folks don't like to accept credit card payments, is because they have to pay the bank. And when they say, I earned $3,000, they want to deposit $3,000 into their bank. They don't want to deposit $2,995. That makes sense. So what's in it for you is that you get a little bit of a kickback from the company offering it. And of course, they're getting kickbacks from the bank and whatever it is they're making money off of, and including the platform itself and in the functions. But those credit card payments can be helpful. Now, expense reports are something more relatable that we all have to deal with, right? We've got our somebody on the job site needs to go out and buy something from Home Depot because the truck didn't show up with enough, or whatever the case is. Maybe they find something that just wasn't there today and they need to go buy it. The worst one I've ever seen submitted was for let me say the worst one, the biggest one, the best one, I don't know, was actually for a four-wheeler. So we had somebody, it was a very large job site, and they couldn't go from point A to point B in a timely manner. And so they desperately needed this four-wheeler. And so they actually went out on their own personal credit card and bought it and got it for the job site, because that was the fastest and easiest way for them to do that. And so then they turned around and submitted that on the expense report. Now, normally we aren't going out and buying four-wheelers, okay? Normally it's the leftover stuff that we need, like the Home Depots, or company lunches, company events, team building exercises, right? Things that we might need there. And so they've gotten to where it's not necessarily that you have to have some kind of company letterhead that says, fill out your monthly expenses. We want to see this every month. Let us know where it went, how much it was for, who the vendor was, and then we'll reimburse you, right? But now what has developed inside of the industry is actually a software platform that will do that. So you can actually take a picture on your phone. Let's say you go to lunch with someone. You just take the picture of the receipt, and then you can quickly and easily code it, right? And send it on for approval. So that's really helpful, and it works out for a lot of folks. The invoice capture, that's usually geared more towards your AP department. So we love our folks over in AP. They do a lot of hard work for us and making their life easier. Because remember, we're talking about the people using the platforms that are helping build our company. The invoice capture is really helpful for our AP team, because instead of sitting there, and I can tell you this because I've done it lots of times, and this is me keying. I'm over here keying. So they're keying constantly all day. Okay, they don't even have to look. They have their 10 key. Sometimes they run a tape, right? And do it that way and compare their numbers to what's on the screen or in their batch, is what they would call a grouping of those. And that takes a lot of time. It does. Not so much brain power, but it takes a lot of time because we're using our physical hands to type in each piece of data. So what's emerged, and I'm quite grateful because now my shoulder and arm feel better, is invoice capture. So what I've seen is that these are especially powerful when it's OCR and AI. So OCR is just and I wish I could tell you the acronym. Maybe someone can drop it in the chat. That'd be helpful. But it's something about like optical something recognition, right? And so what the platform is doing is literally reading the page for you, and it's pre-filling those things that you don't have to now hand key, okay? So examples of that information that you don't have to hand key anymore would be things like the vendor, because it can read that. It can read the invoice number, the date, the amount. And in some cases, I've even seen them able to start picking up on the line items, right? Because some of us are not interested in the total. We're interested in each item that got purchased. And so that's important. Now, what's great about the AI piece being paired with it, because we said the OCR is just reading, okay? And it's an okay reader depending on who you get. Some people have better readers than others. But what's really nice and exceptional is when it's paired with AI. And I know that is thank you, Ryan, that's a good one. Optical character recognition. And, being such a character, you'd think that I'd be able to remember that particular word. And I see Josh piping in too. Thank you so much for that, guys. I really appreciate you. So what happens when it's paired with AI is really, truly magical, because now not only is the software reading the document, but it's also learning at the same time. So let's say it reads an invoice from, who do we want to be from? ThyssenKrupp, because I'm so proud of myself, hopefully being able to pronounce that word correctly, even though I think now they're TKE. So let's say we get an invoice from them first time. I'm just making it up, but it's the first time. The computer reads it, and then it pre-fills what it thinks is the right answer, right? So now we still need our human AP person that we're trying to make the work easier for, to use their eyes and brain to review what the computer has read for them, right? And so it's looking at the invoice and saying, is this, yes, this is TKE. Okay, yes, this goes here. Yes, the amount's correct. Yes, the sales tax is correct, right? And then they're able to approve that invoice or make corrections. So if the invoice reader missed that it was TKE, right, then it would, let's say it populated Barnum and Bailey's Circus. Again, just making it up. That's not TKE. And I cannot write Barnum and Bailey's a check when it's supposed to get, the money's supposed to go to TKE. So what I would do is manually replace that item and the vendor, right? And so same thing if it happens with the amount, sales tax, or maybe it grabbed the total, but it didn't break out the sales tax like you wanted. Once you do it that first time, the AI has learned that. It watched you and it's going to remember. Little creepy, I know, but it's the best use of something like, or what I've seen, one of the best uses for AI, okay? And the reason for that is because the next time that I go to scan a TKE invoice in, it's going to remember, oh yeah, I read this as Barnum and Bailey, but it's actually not, it's TKE. So let me go ahead and put TKE, okay? Same thing with sales tax being broken out or something like that. Then you'd be able to have that kind of prepped for you the next time you go. So it is really phenomenal when you pair OCR with the AI. If somebody comes up to me and they tell me they just have OCR, I'm not excited and I don't really want to hear anything else, because just because you can read it doesn't mean that it's going to be good. And again, we said some of those OCR platforms are better than others. Some of them read really well, and some of them are still learning how to read, is how I would leave that one. So, and again, and let's put this one up here. Thank you, Ryan. Optical character recognition. So some people like the visual of seeing the words written out. Maybe that'll help me remember too. And thank you, Josh, for that. Okay, so that's our blue bubble here. So the next one is going to be, so depending on who you are, oops, let's go back. So sorry. This blue one, it also has an arrow to our bookkeeping. Okay, so this is very important. Just because we're reading it and capturing it, now what? So once our AP person has gone through and approved the items, then you're ready for export or integration, right? And so those would then be approved to go into the bookkeeping software, and we could get ready for our check run on Fridays or Wednesdays or Mondays, whenever it is, right? So that's really helpful. And the same thing with expense reports. The credit card payments are usually just like a feature that people offer on the side. And so they'll say, okay, well, when you're going to pay your subcontractors or your light bill, would you like to pay them with a credit card? Okay, and so that's how they kind of get in there. But again, we're still feeding everything back and forth to the bookkeeping software. What's nice about that is that once those invoices, let's say the invoices did come from TKE and they're for our project and not for the office, once the information's in our bookkeeping software, guess where it's going to go next? To our friend Procore. And so now our project teams can see that that TKE invoice has hit, it's there. They can see the balance compared to their contract and what's still left to pay, or if they're in a position where they need to start talking to somebody about a change order, right? And so that's why it's so important that we want to keep all of these lines moving and integrated and talking to each other. Now we can move on. So our gray bubble here, not to be boring or anything, I love my HR folks and especially my opportunity tracking folks. So this is going to be your things for employees, right? Your E-Verify, any kind of onboarding documentation. A lot of them do a good job of kind of encompassing everything. So they'll have actually like career paths and training things that you can put in there. But in some cases, like we were mentioning before, those things for whatever reason get broken out into separate platforms. And so some instances of that would be, you know, maybe the HR platform that you guys are looking for doesn't have something for career tracking, but you really, really like that platform. So you would buy the HR platform and then you would additionally have another bubble over here for career tracking, okay? And I think I've seen a couple where they've got opportunities and HR kind of bundled together. And so that's kind of why I went there. Now, again, some of this information we do definitely want to feed to our bookkeeping software because we've got to pay our employees, right? And so that information is typically stored over here, and then we want to send it to our bookkeeping software. And so that way we've accomplished a couple of things. Honestly, with any of these three up top, if a subcontract was entered into Procore, it was done one time and sent over an integration into the bookkeeping software. Same with the invoice and same with a new employee or whatever that information is that we're sending to our bookkeeping software, okay? So now all of that information can be into one place. So this is really helpful and awesome. Now, I am going to tell you that each of these bubbles up here and each platform that you get, it's now pretty standard that they have some kind of reporting, right? Or so you'll see some people call it a dashboard. So you can have all of those things in there on those separate platforms, but they don't talk to each other. So what happens if I want to find the most efficient superintendent in my data, right? I've got project data over here, and I've got my employee data over here, maybe some mixture of things in here, which projects they're associated with, which ones finished early, under budget, different things like that. But the data is not connected and it's not talking. So I would have to run some kind of report in Procore and pick up some metrics there and compare it with other things, okay? And there's tons of other use cases that you could say for melding, we'll say, data together to try to get more interesting and more meaningful KPIs. So what's becoming popular, there's really, it's about split 50-50 right now from what I'm seeing, is that the aggregated reporting idea, right? So one option is to feed all of these platforms, or at least the platforms that you want, into another platform that can put all of that data together and make you reports from this place. So now we're able to compare, invoices to project management data, HR data, opportunity tracking. Maybe we want to, look at a custom report by owner, right? Which is the best Mr. and Mrs. owner that we do projects for, and who is that? And so having this aggregating reporting can help with that. Now inside, well, let's go back. So we've got the people that do it inside the platform. And then there's another emergence of these, maybe you've started hearing them in meetings and such, is the idea of a data warehouse, okay? And so basically what we'd be doing is sending, same kind of deal, we'd send all of the information to the warehouse, and then the warehouse would be able to create reports and things like that from us. But when we do that way, the warehouse isn't typically making the reports. Typically we have the warehouse and we have to put something on top of it because it's just a warehouse. It's just out there storing materials for us. And in this case, our materials data. So what we do is do Power BI, which I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing the name for, or there's a couple of competitors now in the market. My current favorite is Tableau. I hope I'm saying that one right. But they're able to sit on top of those data warehouses, or even you can actually even use, well, you have to, right? Power BI with Procore Analytics, okay? So they'll give you access to all of their data on the back end, but in order to make meaningful reports out of it, you need to partner with somebody like Power BI or Tableau to be able to be that interface, the picture part, right? The part that we're all after. So just because we have the data doesn't mean the data is going to do anything. The data is just data. But when we go in and we organize it in certain ways that are meaningful to our teams, then we're able to really extract some powerful KPIs, okay? So we can have data warehouse, or we can just send it to a platform that's going to do all that. Now, the majority of the platforms here are going to be of a couple of schools of thought, right? The first one is going to be the financials, because everybody needs to count their money. And what we find with the bookkeeping softwares, we talked a little bit about it earlier, is that people are data dumping into Excel, okay? And you might have heard a little sadness in my heart, because Excel is a big place, and it's not saying that it's not still important, because I do feel like there's some value in learning Excel and knowing how to use it, or just being able to pop it open real quick and data dump and just look for, let's say you're looking for that famous penny, you want to find a penny in a haystack, then you can go ahead and export to Excel and you have some luck there. But if we're looking at financial aggregated reporting and not really interested in putting the money into some kind of data warehouse, then Profix and Terra, different platforms like that, are going to be able to give you those metrics, and mostly in a, we'll say, a canned fashion. Like, they've been around the financial block a few times and they know what everybody's asking for. They work a lot with folks in construction, right? Things like that. And so they've already got those reports or dashboards built out. Okay. And that's helpful. Now, they also still have the ability to build things that people request, right? So like we were saying earlier with the example of, who's my best superintendent or most efficient, who's making the most money on all the jobs, who's saving the most money, those kind of things. You could definitely do custom reporting still and just kind of, I don't want to say make up KPIs, but whatever it is you're looking for, you'll be able to build it there. Whereas if we were just trying to build it inside Procore, we may not be able to because of that disconnect of data. So what we want to do is have an integrated tech stack so that all of our things are not only passing information back and forth and not only making awesome reporting, but each person, like each worker, only entered their information one time. Okay, that's really powerful. Remember in our Procore example here with the subcontract, somebody put a subcontract in Procore, they sent it to ERP, and then it went to the bookkeeping software after somebody reviewed it. Now that it's in there, it's in the aggregated reporting area. So it's reading all of the data that's inside of there. So this was a fun little chat. If you guys have any other questions, I'll see if I can think of some other things to say about it. I do quite love the picture, not so much for the colors, but it just came out really neat. And so I thought I wanted to share it with other people because this is such a hot topic. And I really hate for anybody to be confused in meetings or feel left out or behind or anything like that. So now we've got all of these words and you are equipped to go to your next meeting and, hopefully understand a little bit better what all the tech folks are talking about. I didn't get too techie because I myself am just on the bare edge of tech, right? Because I don't program or do different things like that. And so their language is a lot different than what mine can be. But as far as translating this type of information back and forth to our project teams, it is definitely something that I can help with and that I love to do. And so that's what brought me here today. Great graphic. Don't forget that you can have multiple platforms. This is just an example of a very simple tech stack, right? For me, this would be a smaller company. We may not even, have some of these things. Like I know a lot of small companies that aren't tracking their opportunities necessarily, or, they don't really have expense reports because they've just got a company card and somebody borrows the company card and they go to the Home Depot. So it just depends on what kind of company you are and have, and then what's going to be best for your teams, right? So that's what we're talking about. These Procore, invoice capture, HR, what are those teams needing to do their job and do their job well for us? So thank you guys all for coming here and tuning in. I especially appreciate Abdur, Ryan, and Josh. And we'll see you guys next month for another one. I think it's Sage next month. I have to check my calendar. So have a good one. Happy Wednesday.